Good evening and welcome to Mindful Live 240. I am your host Nathan Springer. Thank you for being here. It is the 15th, halfway through the month of June already. Halfway through the halfway month of the year. And it's a Thursday. So you know it's Thursday talks. We're talking, we're chilling. We're talking about the topics that arise inside of the live chat. And I'm live right now over on Instagram, over on TikTok, and on YouTube. You can feel free to hit that like button wherever you are viewing this. The like really does help, you know. It helps the algorithm send it out to more people. You could share it too. You could share the live. Tell people, hey, come listen to this live. Or if you are listening to this on repeat over on YouTube, you can also do that and share the live there. You know, starting us off, I know it's Thursday, so we're talking about whatever topics come up, but there was just a story I noticed, and it's a small story where the Attorney General, in kind of uncharacteristic manner, showed a bit of emotion over some accusations about his wife and his private business dealings. I just found some of this interesting. Let's take a peep over at that before we join the discussion. Let's just take a little peep over there. Angry AG defends wife in Senate. An angry Attorney General, Reginald Armour Senior Counsel, defended his wife, Industrial Court member Elizabeth Solomon, in the Senate on Tuesday against remarks on her professional roles earlier by opposition Senator Wade Mack. "Do not call my wife's name," stormed Armour as he wound up debate on the Arbitration Amendment Bill 2023. It all began when Mack alleged that Armour, in earlier piloting the bill, had breached Parliament's standing orders by allegedly failing to declare an interest, saying Armour had a past or current link to a company involved in arbitration, Dialogue Solutions Limited. He also mentioned Solomon. Good night, user. So the Attorney General is piloting a bill in Parliament. This is law, trying to make law in the country. And this bill has to do with arbitration inside of the court system, ways that you could go about resolving legal issues without necessarily going before a judge. Arbitration law is what they were dealing with. And the opposition is alleging that the Attorney General is piloting this bill without declaring his interests. And the fact that he has interest in a company that does arbitration. So, you know, it could seem like a bit of a conflict of interest. You're making laws to deal with arbitration, but you're involved in a company that does arbitration privately. You understand where the conflicts could seemingly arise. And also mentioning there, he mentioned the Attorney General's wife's name, who so happens to be a judge in the Industrial Court. Yo, Australian, good night, bro. Armour in return solemnly said, "Mr. President, I am an optimistic yada 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 yada." However, he said Standing Order 46.8 said the conduct of judges was not to be raised in Parliament except on a substantive motion. Armour said, "I want to go on record to say I abhor the irresponsible and dangerous comments of Senator Mack today. Leave my wife out of it. Do not call my wife's name as a judge of the Industrial Court of Trinidad and Tobago in this chamber in your political guile. Mr. President, I beg to move. Thank you very much." Earlier, Mark asked why Armour had not declared his interest in the company, saying that was a contempt of the Senate under Standing Order 42.5. This rule says before participating in consideration of any item of business in the Senate in which he has a financial interest, a member should disclose the extent of that interest. Mark said, "Mr. Vice President, I have evidence that I am standing by. You could take me to the Privileges Committee because I have it. I have evidence to show where our AG, who piloted this bill, was the chairman of a company called Dialogue Solutions. However, a culture minister, our culture minister jumped in to defend this. And in defending this, he said that Mr. Wade Mack is mixing up two companies here. He's mixing up two groups. Mitchell, in his contribution, accused Mack of confusing two different legal organizations regarding an unnamed document which Mack had cited, yada yada. What Senator Mack did very, very dangerously was conflate Dialogue Solutions Limited with the Dispute Resolution Center. Mitchell said it was the latter. It was the Dispute Resolution Center. It was the dispute resolution. Mr. asks, what was it necessary to call the man's wife's name? We're going to see why her name was called. Don't worry. The story has an ending. Don't worry. I'm not just reading random riffraff. The story has an ending. Don't worry. So Mitchell said the real mistake here was that he's mixing up the Dialogue Solutions Limited, which is Mr. Amo's company, with, well, allegedly, with the Dispute Resolution Center. And Mitchell is saying that the Dispute Resolution Center, which had 12 people, they were part of creating the arbitration law. The 12 people inside of this Dispute Resolution Center included a representative of each of the Ministry of the Attorney General, Office of the Chief Parliament Counsel, and Law Reform Commission, a retired judge, a senior counsel, plus, listen to these two names, Solomon and Senator Anthony Vieira. Now, Solomon is the man's wife. She was partially responsible. She was part of an organization that was charged with assisting in writing this legislation. So you could potentially see where someone could call the name if his wife was part of, allegedly, maybe penning the legislation, and he has a company that may benefit from this legislation. But I actually know a bit about this company because when Mr. Amo was hired, I went and I just, because I'm just a curious person. I like to take in information. That's why I do what I do in the first place online here. I just like the information. I'm a curious guy like that. So I went and I read up some stuff on Mr. Amo. I saw this company. I read about the directors, etc. in this company. Let's go find Mr. Amo's company here. I hope you remember the names of the, which one was it? The Dispute Resolution Center that helped to write this legislation. About Us. We're on the About Us page for Dialogue Solutions. Our philosophy, dialogue, comes from the Greek roots dia, through or across, and log, discourse or talk. Solution, a means of solving a problem or dealing with a difficult solution. So they're about speaking through difficult solutions, of course. Their chairman is one Mr. Reginald Amo, senior counsel. Their director is one Dr. Axel Kravatsky, another guy. But their chairman is our Attorney General. That is on their page. Their page. Scrolling down. So they have something on Mr. Reginald Amo. Now, this is their board here. So meet the board of this organization. The board includes Mr. Reginald Amo, senior counsel. The second person listed on the board is Mr. Anthony D. Vieira, independent senator, listed as on the board of Dialogue Solutions Limited, the company that the Attorney General is the chairman of. He is on the board. I hope you remembered where else you heard the name before. Scrolling down, I'm not going to just call all the board members' names because they aren't dealing with this. But meet our director emerita. The director emerita of this company. One Elizabeth Solomon. You all heard that? You all heard that, right? That's what happens when a small group of people is in control of decision making. Yes, that does happen when that happens. So, when you're asking, why did he call the man's wife's name? According to our culture minister, and you know, I want to speak carefully. All of these people are legal professionals. So I'm speaking carefully. According to our culture minister, you know, I want to say, as the culture minister said, according to our culture minister, the Dispute Resolution Center, he said these are the persons who put forward a draft policy to the government of Trinidad and Tobago for the improvement of arbitration proceedings. Our culture minister said the people inside of the Dispute Resolution Center were the people who put forward a draft policy for this arbitration proceedings business. He called as members inside of the Dispute Resolution Center the Attorney General's wife, who is a senior judge, and an independent senator. And two of them also happen to be members of a board, along with the Attorney General, for a company that does arbitration. So, I mean, I am a married man. I could understand getting angry when someone randomly just calls your wife's name. I mean, you can't just be calling up my wife's name just so. You must have a good reason to be calling up my wife's name in your mouth before we fight here. These are fighting words. I understand, Mr. Amo. But nonetheless, to me, there seems to be some genuine questions inside there. I don't know if anyone else finds those questions a bit genuine, but I do. I mean, maybe there was no conflict and everything was above board, but maybe you could explain that to me. How these people involved in making the law are involved in a private company that benefits from the law, but there's no conflict there and no one saw it fit to declare that there might be some interest there. I think this is something that is worth questioning. But maybe I'm misguided, and I should keep the man's wife's name out my mouth before he goes Will Smith on me as someone's talking about here. And you know, last night I remember a guy as we were speaking, coming down to the end last night, a guy was speaking about the road pavings in Trinidad and Tobago and how bad the road conditions were. And he was saying that no way the government would do that on purpose. Why would the government do that on purpose? And I don't think necessarily the government does that on purpose, but I saw the opposition today making a kind of accusation, and you could see where it comes from, where some of the thinking of this lies. They're telling the government, don't use the road pavings as an election gimmick. And that could be part of it. As the guy was talking about last night, many of these politicians act on what would get them elected more than what would actually be beneficial. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these roads suddenly start to get smooth around election time. Anyway, folks, it's Thursday. We're talking. It's Thursday Talks. What's any questions or comments inside of the chat? Any questions or comments inside the chat on this Thursday? Good night, Curve on, bro. You missed out a piece of information there, man. He missed out a piece of information on the Attorney General we were just speaking about. I don't know if you came in too late. Mr. Hun says, but as far as I recall, the road paving begins after gas prices increased with the start of the war. Opinions on the flying fish conflict? We're in Tobago and Barbados. You know, I'm not sure. Yeah, and I saw he big us up. He said real good. We did really well. Kinda short man, if you wanna join to actually talk, you'd have to come over on TikTok, bro. Because that's where most of the people are for the live, not on Instagram, because that's just how the way it is. Yeah, well, Mr. Of course they're still fighting for flying fish. Of course they are, because it's a constant issue, and as I understand it, the issue is more complex than just simply the flying fish too. You have to bear in mind. You have to bear in mind the flying fish, as I've heard from some of the vendors, the flying fish out there are also part of a food chain, a food web. So for some of the fishermen, when the Barbadians overfish the flying fish, they're actually losing the larger fish further down. My TikTok is Nathan Springer Shortman. They're losing some of the larger fish further down in the food chain. So yeah, it's a pain all how. I hope Tobago know if they separate from Trinidad, they have no flying fish. Lol. Floods in South, lack of maintenance. The floods in South are not because of a lack of maintenance. The floods in South are because too much water falls. There isn't a way to not have flooding. We spoke about this a couple days ago. There isn't a way that there's no flooding on the earth. Flooding is part of the water cycle. That's just reality. I think what we should be, the complaints should be more along the lines of figuring out how to build with the floods in mind, instead of trying somehow to get the floods to not exist anymore. That's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. You could dig the rivers how wide you want to dig them. It's just not going to work. And even if, I've said this before, even if we dug massive concrete dry rivers for all of the rivers so that it could hold all the water at peak flow, then what you're going to do is erode all of our coastlines when the rivers rush out into the coast. The system is created to flood. Yo, short boss, what's happening, bro? If you wanna join to actually speak, you just join there. You just join there, and you could join and actually see words. I don't know if she is in a positive radiation. In the Discord server, I saw she was there, but I didn't see her in the live, so I don't know. There's a picture in the museum of the original shoreline in Port of Spain. Yep. Nathan, what can be done to ease up traffic in Chaguanas? Traffic in Chaguanas. I have thought about this because I have been in that hellscape many times, bro. The main issue in Chaguanas is crossing the highway. That's the main issue. Probably the majority of the traffic in Chaguanas has to do with issues around crossing the highway, getting from one side of the highway in Chaguanas to the other side of the highway in Chaguanas. That creates mayhem. The problem with that is that there are only so many crossings. You could cross under the highway by that Montrose area, or you could cross over the flyover at Price Plaza. Other than that, it's quite Monroe Road or Chase Village, outside of Chaguanas both ways. And on these roads, that's where the problem lies, because these crossings of the highway have traffic going in all directions, so they never are quite smooth in their movement. And because those areas are the sticking spots, then they spread out the traffic throughout Chaguanas. So if I had to find a magical way to ease up that traffic, it would be to create more ways to cross the highway in Chaguanas. That would be one way. And I'm not sure how that's happening. Shogunas is our worst planned town. It's not good for cars, pedestrians, or business, yet it keeps growing. It's growing with a highway in between it. That's a large part of the issue. In Port of Spain, you don't have to cross the highway to go to one part of Port of Spain to the other. In Arima, if you cross the highway, you are outside of Arima basically. San Fernando, basically the same thing. They needed a couple tunnels and a grid layout. Probably. As you said, the planning is the problem there, and the planning stage, really and truly, the planning stage for Shogunas gone years ago. So the cost now to fix a lot of that, the cost is going to be insane.
Nathan, I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
For Shogunas, well, I kind of out of place to be talking about traffic plan for Shogunas, but I'll make a recommendation.
Bro, you're a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, eh?
Right, my recommendation would be, what do you think about stricter laws for cycling lanes and even promote the use of bicycles in some of these areas or motorcycles? Just a recommendation. It might also help the Minister of Health in the amount of money we're spending on, what you call it, lifestyle diseases. We might see a slight decline in that area as well. Just a suggestion.
Bro.
No join.
Bro, listen. You looking for Trinidadians to fight. Trinis love their cars. You are not going to get Trinis to bike it through Shogunas. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. I don't think that's a workable plan. No. Bikes, not Trinidad. Sorry.
Good night.
Good night, sir.
Right, so, as the same thing the gentleman just said, right? You have a suggestion, right?
Yeah.
But in Trinidad and Tobago, right, most people stand for anything. And whatever the government say. This is my opinion, right?
Mm-hmm.
I am not saying anything to anybody. This is my opinion, right?
Yeah.
Whatever any minister say or any government official say, right? We just follow. And in this country, it has so much flaws, and we always blame the government, right? But we as citizens doesn't stand for anything. And this is the problem of the whole country, because we just take what we get and we doesn't stand for anything.
When you say stand for, how do you want the people to stand for the issues?
Standing for the issues is making a standing point. Like if bread raise, we do at the same bread, right? The price of bread. We say, hey, I could afford bread, you know. I don't care if somebody else could afford it, but that is just an example that I'm using, you know. And that stands for everything else other than just the bread, meaning the gas price, meaning whatever laws they pass, because the laws are not. The laws is for the low class citizens. But what about the upscale, the 1%? Not even the 1%, the high class citizens, the laws do work for them. And we have to always take that as citizens. Because what changed in the past 40 years in this country?
You mean?
All the money that, or just,
Yeah.
Since we independent to now, all the money that passed through this country, how is Trinidad and Tobago a better place? How we get it as when we was independent? And I finish with that.
Well, to me, questions like that, it's according to what exactly you mean. Because if you're talking in the literal sense, literally 1962 Trinidad was worse off than 2023 Trinidad. So I understand the point that we didn't best utilize the money. We could have utilized the money and gotten a lot more out of it. That is true. But I will never say something like, we got nothing from it. I heard a Tobagonian, was it the past week, talking about a saying.
I didn't say that he didn't get nothing out of it. I didn't say that. I think that those words came out of my mouth.
I know. I'm not saying that's what you said. I am saying I wouldn't say that. And I'm saying that to draw the point that, I was hearing a quote from an old Tobagonian woman this past week where she say you sit down on River Stone and bad talk the river or something like that. And that's something, as you were talking about what we need to do in Trinidad and Tobago, I think that's a good part of it, where we need to have some balance in it. So regularly, I remember, was that the 2010 election or 2015 election, I made a post and asked people to be able to say something positive about the party that you wouldn't be voting for. And many people couldn't. And what that tells you is that it's not just an issue of standing for something or what we would stand for, but we have bought into some narratives that close our minds sometimes to actually working solutions, because we buy into some narratives. When you're not talking, short boss, just mute the mic when you're not talking. Have a good bit of background noise there. Rome, I see you there, bro. You had something to say?
Right, Nathan. I was listening to a couple things, right? So let we go back to the idea of flooding, right? Even the idea of flooding, a lot of communities is developing at a faster rate than actual planning done by the EMA, right? And a lot of communities is being developed on land that was designated farming land and either swampland or developmental land, right? So the water courses has changed over a period of time, right? Other thing, in particularly with the flooding areas, a lot of the land is below sea level. And when people interfere with the water courses, indirectly or directly, because of the government in itself cannot regulate the rate of which Trinidad and Tobago is developing. So there must be a give and a take on either ends, right? Because while flooding and things is a major issue, we are not carefully planning our cities and our communities so that to have a disaster management system in place. So that's one thing pertaining to the flooding. And now we're going to come to the Shogunas situation. When Shogunas was built, Shogunas was a one-lane highway. As the community of Shogunas started to expand, the government started to play catch-up. And the other side of Shogunas was considered pure farming land and land that is useless. So that's why the highway in itself, it comes smack dab in the middle of Shogunas. Right? So even now, the boroughs that the regional corporation should be managing should be now taking away the authority from the government and decentralizing these communities and managing them properly.
Agreed.
Right? And just let me refer to one thing Short Boss said about who laws are made for. Laws are made for those who have the ability to lobby for laws, and when a law is in existence, the ability of the person to go to court and ask for justification is way different than who the law is made for, because as long as the law is on the books, it is for every single man.
I like that point. I like that point you made there, Room. And it gives the clarification. It's not that the law was made by us per se, but the very nature of the system allows for that bias. That's just the very nature, and I don't think we could actually do anything to make that bias totally disappear. On the flooding issue that you were talking about there, with communities developing faster than the EMA gives approval, like, are there any communities in Trinidad and Tobago that developed with EMA approval? And consider this, even our government builds communities like Greenvale next to a river lower than the average flow height of the river. What did you expect to happen in Greenville? There's no surprise there. So, and our government also built Lapai Gardens next to Carney, the same thing. So I agree totally with what you're saying. A lot of that has to do with the problem. And you know, some people look at the EME and Town and Country and they think that okay, if the EME and Town and Country worked perfectly, it would have solved the issue. I don't think that's possible because Trinidad and Tobago's context, we cannot do that. How many of you grew up in a house that was built with Town and Country approval?
Excuse me, could I
yeah, short boss. Jump in.
Right. So, the gentleman just now, right? He talking about the flood, right? And I live in a flood-prone area, and I was affected by the flood Sunday and Monday, right? And I wouldn't say the area that I live in, right? But what I am telling you, that the area that I am living in, I am dealt with Town and Country. I don't know if it's Town and Country, I don't know if I'm saying the right name. It's the regional corporation. They clear the river causeway, right? And some people and the news doesn't report, right? They say the corporation doesn't clean the drain or whoever in government doesn't clean it, right? But most people who live in next to a river or a drain, wherever the case may be, is take that land. And when the government clean the land, the people doesn't want the excavator pass through the land or the land too close to the river so they can't clean it. So I need you to understand what I'm trying to tell you, right? So if you say Town and Country approval, so if I am Town and Country approval, meaning if I'm living next to a river, right, you're supposed to leave, I think it's between 10 to 15 before the river bank, right? So if I am Town and Country approval, right, why is the government not passing to see, hey, your property is not 10 to 15 from the river also, and we're supposed to mash down your fence and clean the river in?
Well, the thing is, one, they do that sometimes. They do that sometimes. And I want to say, this was the point I kind of started off making with the flooding. I wouldn't say the government or the Town and Country or the regional corporations don't clean the river. Especially over the last year or so, lots of rivers were dredged and cleaned. What I am saying is, I don't think that solves the issue. For one of the main issues with this dredging of the river, I don't know who is the engineer behind any of these works, but I spoke about this Monday or Tuesday. They're dredging rivers into tiny bridges like this. Bridges are collapsing down my side constantly because they keep widening the rivers on narrow bridges. What do you think is going to happen if you widen a river this wide into a bridge that was for a river this thin? Of course the bridge is going to fall in. Yeah.
You see, for example, in the Piaco to Barta area, that particular east-west dock in the Caroni River, right? They will dredge or desilt the river in Piaco, and the river will come down into Caroni. So the water leaves from the higher land to go to the lower land, right? A lot of the central and south areas are below the sea level. So it become a bucket or a basin. That's why it's called the food basket areas. So even when we desilt these areas, at some point the water is below sea level. So it is going to gather. So that's why in some areas they have what we call floodgates to prevent the waters from coming back.
Yeah, but Rome, I think a little geography lesson on Trinidad would help a lot of this, you know. The Caroni Plains are the flood plains of Trinidad and Tobago. They're made when the rivers take up their volume in the mountainous regions and they reach down to the plain. What happens is the volume increases but the speed slows down. So when at peak flow time, in the year, the river floods the plain and you get the flood plains. That's how the Caroni, that's why rice is grown in Caroni. You see rice fields next to the swamp? Because it's a swamp. There's the Caroni swamp. It's all swampy land there. There shouldn't be any surprise in that matter. It's not even necessarily only that it's lower than sea level. It's right next to the river. It's made to flood. Trinidad doesn't have that good planning. Positive, I saw you wanted to go, so you'd go next, just by the way. Trinidad doesn't have that good planning. I remember a while back learning about the different soil types in Trinidad, and the most fertile soil type in Trinidad is under the east-west corridor, where most people live. Where the highest density of people live is where our most fertile soil is, right at the base of our northern range. And we put all our people to live there. And then, it's not actually Caroni that has the most fertile land. Caroni has fertile land because of flooding to some extent, but it isn't the most fertile in terms of the soil itself. Caroni land is not. Caroni land, there's a lot of sapati and the other kind of clayey soil that doesn't actually plant many crops good. They teach this in university. When you go to UE, you go to the soil science department and ask them where the most fertile land is. And originally, the University of the West Indies was an agricultural university. They were supposed to be in control of most of that fertile land. From Mount Hope Hospital going there all the way to Piaco. It's not like we didn't even know that in the beginning. So from the very genesis, the planning of Trinidad was all haywire. So yes, and I said this on Tuesday when I spoke about the flooding. That's why I do have some blame for the individuals that you have to be reasonable. Don't go living on a riverbank if you could avoid it. But then you have to be reasonable that Trinidad was developed a certain way. And if you were born into a home that exists in a floodplain, it's not like it's a snap of a finger to change that reality. So you still have to feel it for some of the people like that. And one other issue before you go positive. The next issue with the cleaning of the rivers, and we are seeing it here. They're cleaning rivers further up, if you know Central. That Caparo region was a real flood-prone nightmare. They're trying to clean those rivers to get the floods out there. And what do you think is happening? The floods are just moving further downstream. Because the water has to collect somewhere. Positive, let me hear what you had to say there, bro.
Question even concerning this issue of flooding in Trinidad. I remember when we had the larger flooding, it was in the same Greenville area. We saw that aerial footage of what was happening. What happened to that footage? Who analyzed that footage? I'm just asking that question. Didn't we not see, okay, since this was the worst flooding in a number of years, didn't we not, as a, well, let me just say as a country, but did not the leadership of the country see it fitting to continue to do aerial surveys of these areas and give the suitable advice or have some of these equipment in place? Because we saw a lot of military dinghies being out, we saw the engineering and the vehicles and equipment. We know we were heading to the rainy season. Were these equipment moved out of their bases and put into these key positions to create a quick response? Or is that we were waiting for it to happen all over again, and we were the international media again, and we walk and we come to send back money again?
But positive. How would we stop the floods? If
I think what I'm saying is, I'm not saying stop the floods, I'm saying prepare for it. Because
how?
The reality is we are going to always get flooding.
Because I think they did prepare for it. They cleaned a lot of the rivers. They made sure that the pumps were functional. They cleaned at the side of the highway. Now, I don't think a lot of the preparation will do anything. I don't think the preparation may work, but they tried to prepare. What I would like to know is, how do you think we should prepare? How can we prepare for the floods?
Could I say something, please?
Yeah, short, boss.
Right. So, as you said, right, country, we never plan and for the progression of this country.
Mm-hmm.
And to go through town and country to build a house, you have to have everything to a T. And you have to have everything to a T to build a house, but the drain in your community is not to a T.
Correct.
So we have more houses built in our community, but the drain is still a drain. It's not all drains in the country are not cast, all drains are not box drains, all drains are not 12 feet deep, 4 feet wide to hold the capacity of water. So as a country, right, you see, everybody's want to blame the government, right? But we have to understand something, that we are not properly ready for no
natural disaster.
Because as a country, we only watch the small things, but we don't ever see about the big things. And it's from the simple things is why as a country we fail. Even though when we get in flooding, right? How much garbage you see coming down the river, and nobody doesn't study that, you know. Yes, it mightn't. Yes, the garbage mightn't be a fault of the flooding, you know. But why we have so much litter still?
I agree, bro. I agree. And you're right on the drainage issue. I have regularly noted that many communities have poor drainage. As I saw someone ask if the people in the flood zones do any planning. The problem with planning, and the reason planning, and many people blame the government for it, is planning needs cooperation over a generally large scale. So if I live in a lot of land, 100 by 50, the front of my land is 50, even if I fix my drain for my 50 feet in front of my land perfectly, I dig it, I cast it, I have my bridge well built. If the guy next to me doesn't want to build his drain, and listen, I don't know how many of you have encountered problematic neighbors. People are a strange animal out there. You know? Human beings are a strange creature. There are people living on planet Earth in a house using water daily that do not want a drain in front of their yard. There are people like that on this planet. It may shock you.
Could I also say something again? Right?
Yeah, short boss.
I said I am living in a flood-prone area. I wouldn't say where that I'm living, right? And the same thing that you are saying, right? My neighbor's water is draining in my property, right? And you know what they will tell me, who are much older than me? Hey, you ought to fix your draining. Understand why I'm trying to tell you, right? They backfill the land higher than mine, right? And them telling me I had to fix my drain, but yet their water running in my property. I'll leave there with that.
Just now before Rome goes short, boss, if it is the water from their property runs into your property because their property is higher than yours, that's not on them. If they have a drain and their drain is running into your property, that's another issue. But if their property, if they raise their property and your property is lower, obviously the water would settle in yours. That's just how it goes.
It doesn't have a drain. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Right. Well, that's a whole other issue. Yeah. Yeah, Rome. What you're saying there?
Nathan, you asked a question before. How can we deal with flooding issues? Right? And one of my suggestions in a previous place that I worked, that we came up with, you must have building codes for flood-prone areas. And if people refuse to follow these particular building codes, meaning that if I'm building in the Caroni Basin, I must raise my foundation to 12 feet. Because there's an estimated average in terms of expected rainfall, and so far I have not seen any expected rainfall over a particular amount. Yeah. So we must like even in Louisiana in the swamp areas, they have building codes in terms of how you should build in those areas, and then people who live in those areas, there are rules that you have to follow. Well, you must have a independent generator, you must have a small boat, you must have particular safety training, and that's the only how I could see as citizens we are being prepared. Because to wait on government entirely and the ODPM for the disaster management ODPM only get involved with issues when they are critical.
Yeah.
And we need to understand the purpose of the ODPM.
Yeah.
They
correct.
are a critical response team to critical issues. They are not there to manage your
day-to-day
basic level product.
Yeah. Bro, I have wondered this because I remember in primary, positive, you'd go after me if you have something to say. I remember back in primary school in the 90s, I used to learn that they would show you the houses that they built in I can't remember which textbook this was, but they would show you houses built in Caroni, and there are floodwaters there. So people in Caroni build their house on stilts above the ground. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. We have different houses for different places in Trinidad and Tobago. And then as I get older, I would drive through Central and through areas that I know in rainy season has water like a young lake. And I watch a new development doing, and they're building flat houses with 2-block heights as they just step up into their homes. I'm like, this is evil. Whoever is the developer here and going to sell these homes for 1.3 million to somebody poor little starter family, that's evil. So I agree with you, Roman. I think that might be the only solution, and I've said that before. What we need to do is figure out ways to live with the flood, because the water is going to be there. There's nothing we could do to get the water out of that region. The water is going to be there. So in the regions where we know floods are very likely, you need a certain kind of building code. So for one, a building code that I think of regularly, I am looking at the highway, our north-south highway, the Uriah Butler highway. Because of the clearings that they are doing further upriver, we are getting every year now water crossing the highway. That was not a problem, generally speaking, 6, 7, 8, 9 plus years ago. That is a more recent problem. But the highway has limited drains under it. That's just the reality. And I see them dredging rivers to the left of the highway, bringing more water to the highway faster and faster. And the highway still remains with the same river channels under it. So for one, that highway needs to change, obviously. We have a highway running from the dry area of the country into the swampland. That highway needs to be a causeway in the first place. Obviously.
Nathan, that's just not the highway. That's every single development that goes on in Trinidad and Tobago. There has been no major drain works in Trinidad and Tobago in the last 75 years. So all we focus on is drenching, the silking, and shoring up the drains. So, yeah, go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, positive.
No, because what we're sharing here is things that I believe we could even discuss at the secondary school level, because these things seems to me like common sense. Like anybody could figure it out and say, okay, if the water would always be there, go up. My question or my concern with Trinidad and Tobago is we can have this system as Rome is implementing it, but who is going to enforce it? And when we begin to enforce it, you attack the enforcer. And the enforcer is safeguarding you, your organization, your property, your homes, and your systems. Because from what I'm hearing here, where I used to live in Tobago long ago, it used to flood often, I could be honest with you. And ironically, they're building an airport right there now. But let's see how that goes. And by speaking to my grandfather before he died, they built the house on stilts using old styling. Since they're doing houses on a downstairs, you find where, as a child, I used to like to jump up to reach the roof. And at 17, 18, I could find out I can't walk below the house anymore. So when the road is flooded, we safe upstairs in the house. But the water would still flow at the bottom, and then you run off and all that. So I am now thinking, if back then they had that technology, we do have that technology now. How far we have all this predictability, and we could drain water out of the sea and all these kind of things, and we can do a proper assessment on some of these areas to be able to say, yeah, what's going on. Build this height, and if you don't build this height, you break in the house.
Positive.
Can I say something before anybody else go, please?
All right, go ahead, short boss. Let me hear.
I am living in a flood area.
Yes.
Okay, right? And it is some people up to this day We getting flood. I live in here almost 10 years. And they'll still build a flat house. They will still build a flat house. Only talking about tongue and country. But what tongue and country really approved? So you only have to go to tongue and country if you have to get a loan from the bank. You can build a house if you have a piece of land. You can build a house on a land without getting tongue and country approval if you're not taking a mortgage.
It don't even have to be your land.
Right, it don't have to be your land.
Like Trinidad.
Tongue and country is not coming to check that.
Yes.
We talking about tongue and country, but tongue and country does absolutely nothing.
But short boss, that's what positive radiation was actually talking about there. And then would be the problem, enforcement. And I could already see, listen, Trinidad doesn't want property tax. And you know, I have my squabbles with property tax too. But you could imagine somebody going by somebody's house with bulldozers to break it down because it's not built according to code. That's a hard ask. Where I think you might get an easier go is in giving people the money to do it. And I don't like the idea. I find our government gives too much money already. Our government gives out too much goodies. But if you look at it on the flip side, where if they don't give them to build the house, the problem is they give them when their house is flooded. This is going to sound callous, but I think that is a problem that would solve itself if the government doesn't get involved. If your house is flooded out year in, year out, after a while you are just not going to have resources to keep living in that place. But we know in Trinidad and Tobago, we could say the government ain't helping with the government how to give us the money. Then we go buy back a refrigerator, buy back a stove, buy back a bed, and put it back in the same low house in the same flood-prone area.
Right, so let me respond to something that Shortboard said. Town and country is responsible for planning and mapping of communities. Right? So while you do not have to get approval, it is advisable that they give you the approval and they have mapping in terms of the mappings in terms of the highly prone flood areas, how to build your house, where to build it, and what kind of house is expected in certain areas. That is quite clear from town and country as a planning perspective. The other part is why people know certain areas flooding and they still building the type of house they want. We are living in a time where... Could I just cut you 1 second, right? 1 second, right? So what you're saying is correct, you know? But after I get town and country approval, how much people pave the whole yard, meaning concrete? And you're not supposed to pave your whole yard. You're supposed to have a certain grassland for water to run off and seep. How much people plaster the whole yard concrete? So you're saying tongue and country is the approval for that, right? But what I'm saying, and I want you to understand this, tongue and country to ever go back and check to see if you really tongue and country approval. And you can go ahead and talk now. Right. No, I was just giving you some of the process that is supposed to do. I'm not saying whether, and we all know that enforcement is a major issue in Trinidad, and we can't get away from that. Right. Because that's one of the things that we will have to develop a certain level of discipline in order to chart our society forward, right? But right now we are living in a time and a culture where people believe that they are entitled and this is their land and it's their property and they are free to use it as they will because you are infringing on their right as per se the Constitution, and they could build a house how they please. And when the place flood out, it's the stinking UNC, the stinking PNM, the stinking PPP, and that is where as a society we need to become collectively more intelligent in terms of our choices, because it's going to continue to impact us as a developing nation for a pretty long time. Agreed. I see you heard the word enforcement and you pop up, Sylvan. That's it. That's your call card. Enforcement and you arrive. I agree with what you're saying there, Room. And to me, a solution for what you're talking about there sounds like we probably should not give people compensation. Well, how do you go with the election if they don't give compensation? compensation.
Yep.
It's a tricky monkey to skin.
It is. And the thing is, in Trinidad and Tobago, the nature of our politics. On one side, how they would win elections if they don't give the compensation. And on the next side, if it's a constituency where you would never win nonetheless, if you don't give compensation, whoo, the noise that is going to make. I was hearing the opposition MP for St. Augustine complaining that the government taking too long to give the people their money. And I'm like, wait, what you mean their money? Like, I understand, no one, I said it at the beginning, I understand, it's a hard thing to face a flood and lose a lot of your resources. I said it last Tuesday, where you have to understand on the middle income side of life, most middle class people, their home, their property is where they store their wealth, so a flood does a really, really bad job at that. I understand. But nonetheless, compensation in this isn't something you are due or owed. This is a favor. And I hear the UNC MP, the opposition MP, saying it like the government owes them this money. How come the government hasn't given them so much and so much, and the government only give them this much while they really needed that much? And I'm like, really? Difficult thing. Yeah, positive. Yeah. Go ahead.
Right. I come in with a very harsh and what some might consider a very callous recommendation.
Not a problem with me.
If you're building a credit and you want compensation, in order for that to happen, you need to supply me with a town and country approval. If you have no town and country approval, salt. This is why I say it with some harsh and callous. Because I am in the process of constructing a home. My mother and one of the things go ahead. Not just tongue and country approval, but adherence to the tongue and country approval.
Good point.
So, I was getting there, but you hear what I'm saying, right? I usually follow a construction company in the US, and the draftsman who did my plan explained to me what the process is supposed to be. Do you know when you dig your foundation locally, before you put on your steel beams and you cast it, an inspector is supposed to come and check it?
Yes. As I've said before, just now you'll continue positive. I am in construction. I do contracting. We build all around the country. We build with country approval, and only in Arima has an inspector ever come for every point, every stage of the project. That's the only area. For one I'm talking residential side here. For one project in Arima where an inspector actually came for every stage. Other than that, those inspectors don't care. Some places where they do come, they don't check. They come and they ask you, everything good, bye? Yeah, alright, cool.
No, I would go so far as to say, even in my process when they explained it, one of the things that we were told is that in Tobago, let me speak specific to Tobago, there aren't enough inspectors. So if you have 5 houses being built, there aren't enough inspectors to go around. This is what I was told. Do not quote me, guys. I do not have courthouse clothes. My clothes are for weddings and for official functions. But I'm just saying that to say, Nathan, this is part of why we're having these problems. Because if there's adherence to code, and you could record and say, okay, I did not approve this, and the person ended up in a squeeze, you have no claim for compensation.
Correct.
But I'm to house insurance. So you don't need town and country planning approval to apply for home insurance. We do home insurance in Trinidad and Tobago.
Why are we doing home insurance? The government is our home insurance, bro.
We have home insurance, but certain places cannot get it. Especially flood-prone areas cannot get no house insurance. Once you know why? I'm listening. Nobody insures a bad bet.
Yeah.
No, it's not only that. It's not only that, because he was talking about compensation, right? So, you want compensation, but you have a flat house in a flood-prone area. Like, farmers is complaining that they want compensation, right? So farmers planting on land that is not theirs. They don't have a farmer's badge, they don't have the agriculture badge, but they have a competition. So how would the government supposed to compensate people? So if, right? Because it have plenty people, I want you to understand what I'm saying, it have plenty people who just suck this country, I'm not saying the government is do the best they could do for everybody, but there are people who just try to use and manipulate the system. Everybody for compensation, but not everybody's entitled to compensation. And our media doesn't portray this.
But short boss, what you saying there is literally the point that Positive and Positive especially trying to make, He is saying, and that's what I'm saying. The problem in Trinidad is that everybody gets compensation. Someone could be squatting. Like, there are people who are squatting. The government paid them to leave the land they squat. Hey, the government not supposed to pay you to leave the land you're squatting on. But okay, you were there for X amount of years. The government paid them to leave the land. They did not leave the land. Natural disaster hits, and they still get compensation. And that's the problem. That right there is the problem. It's not supposed to happen like that. And as I said earlier, without compensation, some of these problems, I think, may solve themselves. But it's too much of a political hit. Yeah, Room?
Not just a political hit. We live in a society where we don't have control of our highest court, where people could go and cry distress and discomfort to a privy council that have no cultural experience, right? And some nice lawyer could speak all kind of nice dialect language and take the government to privy council and end up paying millions of dollars for the sake of discomfort.
You think someone would win a case at the privy council for compensation on the government?
I have seen similar cases. I cannot call the case law right now, where they don't call it that. They call it discrimination and the great distress, right? And where in a case like that, because where we don't have the wherewithal power to direct our society. Because when someone takes a case to the Privy Council, it takes about 5 years before it's properly adjudicated.
Correct.
And then everything goes on pause. And then the government think twice about before it going to the next situation like that. Because there is no expediency to resolve those issues in a way that is expedient.
But I know you're shifting a bit, and I don't mind that. But on the issue of the Privy Council, yeah, it could become problematic on the government side, where it could put a chill factor because of that whole delay, and people could take them there. But on the citizen side, I think there may be more of an advantage towards the government, because for the average citizen, the ability to go to the Privy Council to argue a case is prohibitive, but by just nature of the requirements of it. So an average citizen cannot carry the government to the highest court, generally speaking, unless they get freedom law chambers to take up their case for them.
Well, generally speaking, they just did it with the highway. And we had a highway that we was projected to build at a particular time. One gentleman take the government straight to the Privy Council, and the Privy Council, in its wisdom, in this particular time, give the government the go-ahead to continue to build the highway. But remember, when you're doing a project plan management, you plan time, you plan labor, you plan. So while this particular while they give the what they call it, a policy case, the recommendation, you are the government is still incurring, or we the citizens still incurring $1 billion of cost while having all this equipment, these laborers, these specialists still down there. And then the government, then the opposition will come. This is overrun. This is that. So there is no proper management in terms of how these things supposed to. I believe things like these supposed to be streamlined because of the high level of cost that every citizen is going to bear. Because we all have to pay for it, whether we like it or not.
So you think you just now, a question to Rome on that. You think if we move over to the CCJ, a lot of these issues may become, if not solved, at least expedited?
I believe that the Privy Council has no dog in the fight, so they're going to adjudicate as they please at their leisure and their time, as they have done and they have continued to do. And even if something is expedient for them, it will move from 5 years to 2 years. So probably we have to find a new direction.
Yep. Just before you all go short, boss, or positive, you know, what you're saying there, by and large, I kind of lean some towards the Privy Council because law needs that trust for it to work. We require that trust, and I'm not sure if the CCJ would pull that trust from the citizens as of yet. That was part of my thinking. But you see the point you're making there about the cultural side of it, and especially the fact that we are supposed to be based on the British style of law, common law, which is precedence, which is supposed to, as it were, have a cultural feel to it. It does make sense, a lot of sense, that our highest court should have a cultural understanding with their feet in the water of the Caribbean situation. That does make a lot of sense. Yeah, short boss. Who's next? Short boss or positive?
Positive, go.
Positive, go ahead, bro.
No problems. Even as we were sharing and we discussing the Privy Council CCJ thing, I had an opportunity to speak with some persons who are on the Privy Council. When I got there, when the TJ sent a group of young youth assemblymen to the Privy Council, to the UK. And at the time I was studying this for UB, so I did pose a question to them. They gave me a political answer, one. Two, they were leaning to the side of not wanting to adjudicate in some of these regions. What I would also say is, remember, if we go through all the correct steps now, by the time the case gets to the Privy Council, they will read the judgment of the previous judges. That would have a part to play in the ruling. And there is where I think the cultural aspect of it could be incorporated. But as it pertains to this type of issue, I don't think the problem is which highest court of the rule. I think it's our legislation and the laws we have on the books. If the law indicates, in order to be compensated for flooding compensation, you must have town and country planning approval. You must bill according to spec. Once we have that there on the paper, and you do not comply, you go to the Privy Council for it. The Privy Council will simply rule the regulations of your country states. So due to so reason, thereby we find you wrong, in my view, in my layman non-lawyer view, in my bush lawyer context.
Jonathan Cumberbatch, it's what I was saying is not that I have trust in the Privy Council. That's not the point I was making. I was saying that for the judicial system to work by and large, countrywide, for the only reason a court works, a random guy in a fancy robe sitting on a seat up high says something and people are like, oh no, they cry about it or they cheer about it. That only works because people trust what he says is going to have an effect, and people trust that the rulings of this court are by and large just. And what I'm saying is, I think in Trinidad and Tobago, if you were to get the 1.4 million people of varying backgrounds and beliefs and ask them about trust in a judicial system, I think you would get more people trusting the law lords in England, whether it be because of the history of colonialism. It might very well be that, but I think you would get more people trusting them than the CCJ. And just the fact of trust does add some credence state to me. Because you do not want a system of law where a large portion of the people feel like they aren't getting real justice. And trust me, with the CCJ, that is going to happen. Especially if the opposition we have right now is in opposition. That's going to be a cantankerous situation. And positive radiation, I have read quite a few of the Privy Council's rulings, and I find their rulings by and large to be practical. Even times where they rule against the what Trinidad might see as in their better interest, you read it, and it's a logical breakdown. They have their rulings there. It's pretty clear to see their logical pathways. I don't find their rulings to be shaky on that side. I don't have a criticism like that.
One thing always concerns me, Nathan.
Just now before that, Jonathan Cumberbatch, think about the demographic makeup of most of the islands of the Caribbean compared to Trinidad and Tobago. Go ahead, Room.
One thing that always concerns me with things like the Privy Council and people that operate outside of our jurisdiction is that they are thousands of years old. Right? So they have had their brutal stages of development that brought them to this sophisticated culture and society that they now enjoy. We are a young society, only 50 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And our society must go through some things to reach that stage of development. And so the very context in which they set for me, it doesn't augur right.
I get what you're saying. It's like, okay, I'm a youngest brother. I have two older brothers. I like what you're saying there. I like that idea you just said there. I have two older brothers. Imagine if every single exam I ever had to do, every single challenge, they already had an institution made there to do it for me. They will cripple me as I grow older. And I could see what you're saying there, that it is due to us as a independent growing society to be able to create these things ourselves, even with the errors that may come with it. Is that what you're saying there?
Not just the errors, but the lens in which they look at it. For example, one of my major issues with the Privy Council is that when they say hanging is inhumane and it goes against the right on the charters of the UN, but the amount of people England put to death row. You understand? So now you are...
So wait, England get to kill out the murderers. So what you're saying is we ought to be able to kill out some of ours first before we reach the peaceful stage.
It's not just that. It's that you are holding our society to a different standard that you went through, and not allowing us as a society.
I like that.
To develop through our mechanisms.
I remember, right, just before you go short, boss, right? Let me just say a little tidbit I remember there in learning in environmental, when they were talking about the different industrial revolutions and all of that. And so many of the northern and western powers were telling countries like Brazil and many of those southern hemisphere countries, no, you cannot cut down your forests. We must all sign agreements, worldwide agreements for deforestation and to stop it. And some of these countries were saying, bro, you already had your time where you abused your environment. You are sitting high on your laurels now because of it. And you are telling me that I cannot abuse my environment to reach where you reach. It's like when you see some of those wealthy countries, and this is one of the issues with climate change that we all have to pay attention to. When Greta Thunberg says we need to stop oil tomorrow, she's speaking nonsense. She's speaking from the idea of a wealthy country in Northern Europe, where the idea of stopping oil tomorrow, you know, there might be some hiccups. Actually, it would cause the country to collapse. But you're seeing that, you know, it might be feasible. For developing countries, that's starvation for the majority of the developing world instantly. So they're talking some of these issues, and I agree with you, Room. They're talking some of these more advanced cultural issues, while they already assassinated JFK, assassinated Abraham Lincoln, went through the Tulsa massacres, etc. I understand what you're saying there, bro. I like it.
But as a society, do we stand for anything? What we stand for as a country? We stand for absolutely nothing.
Again, I don't understand exactly what you mean by stand for. I don't totally understand that.
We stand for fed, rum, sugar, and whining.
Let me explain that, right? What we come, right? So, for example, right? We look up to all the coastal nations, and we look up, for example, Trinidadians. We look up to America, right? We look up to England, but in each of these places, each of them stand up for the rights. In certain places, certain parts of the world, there's protests and come together as a nation, as people. What we never come together and stand and think enough is enough.
I mean, here's the thing I'd say.
Look, come back to join us.
Yeah, Jonathan, let me hear what you're saying.
No. Again, I want to applaud the forum for keeping the conversations on real topics, which the media doesn't really want to focus on. But he's speaking on a huge term and the role of the Privy Council. The conversations are these are a bit moot in that, as you know, it requires a 3/5 majority of Parliament to change out the Constitution, and it's unlikely for many years to come that we'll ever have that, say, for a coalition. We spoke about that in a previous forum. The partnership had the 3/5 majority, and it is clear that their priorities were other things rather than trying to bring any real change. It is beyond embarrassing. The Privy Council has stated in repeated rulings they're growing inappropriateness of them having to adjudicate on independent and worse yet republic islands and constitutions. And we seem to just keep plowing on. It's laughable, and they probably do. They have repeatedly had to return poor judgments. People, our local judges wrong in law repeatedly. It's very embarrassing. Many of you would be aware of the 1990 coup judgment, insurrection judgment, where we ruled wrongly, which we made a ruling that no other country in the world would have ruled. And, but of course, it was too many years down the road by the time the Privy Council got to it. It's embarrassing, and we are not developing by continuing this apparatus. But as I said, ultimately it requires the 3/5 majority. Other than a national referendum, which could be done at the election cycle, but that is up to the politicians.
Jonathan, let me make
Yes.
Let me make a quick interjection. Not any lawyer is able to take a case to the Privy Council. The kind of money and clout is invested in that.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of people millions of dollars. So it wasn't their priority. And it's clear to see. That's all I'm saying on that particular topic.
And let's not go down the road of the partnership today.
That's a never-ending road.
In regional history, bar none.
Correct. But to go back to what Short Boss was saying there, in terms of standing up for something and standing up and saying enough is enough, that kind of thing, and protesting. I don't mind the protests. Protests have done some good. But here's one of my issues with protests. You join your number to a cause. Are you sure the cause ultimately leads to the direction you want it to lead to? The partnership in 2010 was part of people standing up for the issues. People found that the Prime Minister, Mr. Manning, back then, he was building a church for this Pena lady. Who is that? And called her this white man come from Canada and getting all the jobs in Unicott. Enough is enough. Do so. When he come to here, remember that. Remember, when he comes to your property.
Yeah, that's my only point I would have made about the protest. Point Trinidad has a rich history of protest.
Right.
I was in the Section 34 protests.
Right.
There's a topic that when it hits you, you have to be able to come get to the streets, and we are fortunate we're in such a democracy where we can. Of recent, it's been the LGBTQ concern. And persons coming out in their community
Yes, and we have protests, and that's the issue that I say they're short, boss. So when we tell people we need to stand up, that's why I ask stand up for what? How do you want them to stand up? Because very often what happens, very often, you join a protest and the people with the loudest voice take your number and carry it towards their mission. And you, whatever you join that protest for, that's not what it ultimately ends up being for. That's why nearly every single riot that has ever been done worked to the negative of the people who rioted. So when Dr. King spoke about riots are the voice of the unheard, he wasn't giving a recommendation. He was giving a fact that if people's voices are not heard, they're going to rise up. But the problem on the unheard voices side is when you do riot, very often you get negative consequences for it. So when you're telling people they need to stand up, I think the best way to stand up is become knowledgeable. That's the best way to stand up. Learn as much as you can. Yeah, short boss, what's that?
Nathan, so what you said, right? So we as a civilization of Trinidad and Tobago, we're supposed to get more wisdom and they say wiser, right? So we getting wiser, and if nobody acts with the knowledge and the wisdom that they're getting, how do you see that we going forward to change the things that going on in this country? Is that a question I'm asking?
Let me respond to this in partially. Humanity is a very selfish being. Right? And I'm saying that to say this. People, we do stand for things as long as it suits our agenda. Right? So we need to become an educated electorate that what is best for the populace. And that's the only way collectively across the board, because a lot of people go out to protest because it has a color attached to it. And not because it's what is best for the populace. So part of it is we need a detachment of color and focus on what is best for the populace.
And I hope in being knowledgeable. So here's a prime example of the short boss. Election cycle is in the air. Elections are August 14th, local government. When you hear what people talk about and what they're lobbying for, what they're making noise about for this election, you recognize they aren't even knowledgeable about this. When you hear that some politicians are promising them changes to our firearms laws, and for those of you in the chat that follow me enough, you know I like the idea of that. I think you should, people who are qualified and pass the legal requirements, allow them, and yes, by all means, let's look into that. But that's not going to happen at the local government level. So when you see people falling for this, when you see this is the topic that people discuss when local government elections are wrong, you're understanding that people are missing the point because they don't even know. So knowledge from just that point, it seems obvious to me then that people aren't knowledgeable on this issue. So before I tell people, all right, here's what we want, what we need to do. We need to go and pick up arms and then go and face the enemy. Okay, before we do that, let's learn how to fire the weapon, learn who the enemy is. Because if we just go to pick up arms and go attack the enemy, we may be shooting ourselves. You understand what I mean there?
And one of the things that is very important, Nathan, is a blatant understanding of the truth.
Ooh.
What does that mean? Is that a lot of people who are out there protesting is very, I don't mean it in the colloquial terms, but it's very uneducated on the matters, and they want, and I'm going to say this as blunt as I can, and they want a hamper. Right? What do I mean by that? And the MPs is some of the most deceitful, conniving, low moral people I've ever seen, because you know damn well the people I am speaking to do not understand the subject matter.
But that's the point. That's
if I could, it came up in yesterday's forum where we raise the issue of the reluctance to educate, to share, show people, how the sausage is made, or to get beneath the hood of the car. And I, for the life of me, I don't understand it. It speaks to our politics from a different age. As I said, I've applied what I speak to where I work and so wherever I've worked. The more employees are aware how the company operates and makes its money, it informs what they're going to get angry about or what they're going to get frustrated about, because they will understand the limitations and they understand about the competitors out there and why the company could only offer so much, and that's just the money part and all the other issues. But it really cuts both ways. The education system is failing, and the failure to teach civics anymore. And then on the other side, politically, while we do our press conferences, while there are discussions held, you tend to get the information when the buff come. After the opposition says something foolish, the Prime Minister comes out and buffs the opposition. And it's unfortunate because the opposition, as I said, they have never offered an alternate plan, an alternate idea, an alternate option. They insist on a method of gotcha politics. Like, look what Nathan do. You see what Nathan say? You see what Nathan do? That is not what the model is supposed to be operating as. But that is how they believe they stay popular. Look what Nathan dress up.
That's unfortunate. That's unfortunate, and I regularly say that does an injustice to the government, because the government doesn't have a good bounce off of ideas for. They just have someone who opposes.
You're opening your mouth, as you see in some of the more advanced countries, which actually we don't see enough of. But most of our news is American-centric, and they are now lost in your wars.
Right,
but,
no problem.
If you were to see how a lot of maybe we see how Australia, New Zealand, European, some of the Asian countries as well, you can't open your mouth unless you're talking about an alternate option or idea. You don't open your mouth just to say, gotcha, look what you say. And you leave your pecan for in the parliament. You could drop your pecan about what the plan is.
I'm just going to piggyback on this. And now, with this gotcha politics, they have a way of enraging their tribe.
Yeah.
Because their tribe now is just waiting to find a reason to be angry, because they feel as if that I am from a different tribe and it's only this tribe across the road eating. So now that the leaders say, I got you, it's time to pick up my sword.
Well, that is the very nature.
It's even worse. You rely on gotcha when you yourself have no idea. If Nathan says we go in this way because the weather, the climate, that, and I don't have anything to say, and I hope to get in power, what I tend to rely on is, you see how Nathan went and talked to the people in a high-handed way. You see how, as I said, using the word not as a pejorative, but it is a retarded way. It is retarding.
Holding us back.
It is retarding the entire process.
All right, and here's how I would say that. This is symptomatic of the Trinidadian tribal politics. That, as you said, Room there, that is the very nature of tribal politics. And the reason people like it is tribal politics links to what you were saying there, Jonathan, that I don't need to show that I am a better option than you. I just need to show that I am your tribe and you are the opposing tribe. And if I could make that the reality, then people will choose me whether I'm bad, good, or indifferent. So it's a convenient technique for politicians, and they use it to no end in Trinidad and Tobago. They love it. They love it. They love it. And I think Trinidad and Tobago has a way it naturally feeds into it because of the 50-50 racial divide. So it gives a convenient a convenient divider for Trinidad and Tobago. But I think Trinis need to understand. Go to India and watch that tribal politics occur when everyone looks the same. Go to Rwanda and see tribal politics occurs when everyone will literally coming from the same peoples. It's not about look, it's not about anything. You'd find some, I remember, was it Star Trek way back in the 80s or whenever, made an episode where a tribe, two different tribes on a planet were fighting. One side had their white face on the side and a black face on the side, and the next side was vice versa. And I recognize people will just find a way to divide into the tribes. And the reason is it's convenient for the leaders. That tribal thing is convenient for the leaders. I don't need to convince every individual. If all of you tag yourself into a tribe, all I need to do is get the tribal membership. And once I get the tribal membership, to hell with each individual. And that's what some people don't understand. This tribalism works against you as an individual. The people who are in your tribe, they don't have to care about you as the individual. You are part of the tribe. Once the tribe remains on my side, the individual could die for my part.
Nathan, can I say something, please?
Of course. Just now, before anyone goes on, though, it's 11:18. It's closing time. Let me hear your closing statements, folks. This is going good, though.
No problem, right? I agree with all you're saying. To divide and conquer, that is just how it's going to be, right? But as citizens in this country, we're not supposed to thinking about no color and about this party and that party. We're supposed to think about the betterment of the society going forward. And as a country, right, no matter who comes into power, the next government is going to have an inquiry. And they have an inquiry and they spend X amount of millions of dollars into an inquiry. So why are we having an inquiry and we spend X amount of dollars and nothing has come out of the inquiry? That doesn't make sense. And as a population, we're not supposed to study, I studying this party or this my color. We're supposed to study the betterment and how we're moving forward as a country, or what we're trying to achieve as a country going forward.
Correct.
Just to piggyback on his comments, he says the inquiry doesn't make sense, but it makes very much sense in terms of the culture of this country. We like a lot of talk. We are not action-oriented. A commission of inquiry is supposed to conclude with a course of action, you know.
Supposed to.
What comes out when we spend X amount of millions of dollars? What comes out of it?
Well, it's a puppy show, and it's designed to be a puppy show.
Ink and paper.
I'm not saying some of it is not valuable, as we saw with the Clico one, because it was important for the public to see, because it was beyond even my comprehension, the degree of fraudulent conduct that was going on as business culture in that organization. That's important to see.
Yeah.
But what was actually, and to be fair, there's some things that were done. The government has done a very good job actually of the winding down of so many of Clico's tangled interests, to the point where Dupre may yet be staging a comeback because everything is so clean and sparkly now. But to the other point, we're twice tonight. But what was the last thing you said, Nathan? There was something you were talking about. I wanted to.
What last thing I said? I can't recall the last thing. I was talking about tribalism and Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, no. What is a truism, though, is regrettable, but a truism of democratic politics across the world. You try to find out what fires up your base. A fired up base comes out to vote on election day.
Correct.
That is the bottom line. We've seen some parties resort to coded race talk in Trinidad, more than likely in our history. We saw that, based on the stats, despite the conduct of the partnership, come 2015, over 74% of East Indians voted for the UNC. You know, it's a sobering statistic in that it showed, regardless of what went down, people see it as their team.
But that's the nature of their team. That's the nature of what their team and my team is.
And
let's see how, but bless the hearts of the 26% or so who voted otherwise.
The 20-something%.
Yeah, room.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not finished there, Jonathan. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I wasn't quite, because
Go ahead.
comparisons are there in the Republican Party it was law and order up until the late 60s and the early 70s, and then with Ronald Reagan in 80, beginning to court the evangelical vote, the Republican Party all of a sudden became this party of family values. And seeing the world, they're reaping the whirlwind. In terms of America's politics has now become a battle of I don't know what is the word, lifestyle or what have you, as against
a culture war.
Economic.
That's what they call it. It's a culture war.
As against the ODS is really about economics and distribution of the wealth, so to speak. America is the largest debtor country in the world, so I have to use that word carefully. But it's sad that you're watching how a great power will collapse on this nonsense.
Well, late stage empire.
Politicians elsewhere in the world.
Jonathan, late stage. I assume you're a man studied in some history. Late stage empires will late stage empire. Nearly all late stage empires do the same thing, you know.
But there's also a presumption that you're going to always win because you've won all the time and you just think it's going to happen. So, but the world no longer, as a point to friends abroad, the world no longer, the world start making their own Levi Jeans, their own Coca-Cola, their own rock and roll.
And I saw Africa is attempting to use. Africa is now attempting to use some kind of Afri-XM bank to do their own foreign exchange and move away from the US dollar. Now, I know many people talk about that.
Education.
What's that? What's that?
That has to do with education. Many of the countries, of course, they send their children to the finest universities and they all started to understand. But wait now. It's only because of World War II.
Right.
Itself and its currency in everybody's
more
pocket.
People are doing that.
America currently has 70% of all foreign reserves in the world.
And
but however,
that's the reason their debt could be in the trillions and they're living normal because everyone needs their money.
Their debt, somebody pointed out to me, which is scary, their debt is actually considered an asset on the books of some countries. That has been the culture, the financial culture. America owes me X, which makes me look better. It's a highly dysfunctional, but as I said, a lot of things are now being called into question, and as I said, there are coalitions in South America, there are coalitions in Africa, there are coalitions in Asia, as we speak, about the use of money amongst themselves, and it's going to have an impact. And now, late in my lifetime, in the middle of your lifetime.
All right, Room.
Interesting to keep your eye on.
I will. What's that, Room, in your closing here? What's that?
In my closing statement, two things I'm going to start from the top. America has done what it has always done: create a strong man and a demon for everybody to focus on, right? And they have done that with their policies, their foreign policy, as well as their money and their currency. If you don't agree to it, they will excommunicate you like the Catholic Church and make you a leopard, right? As they has done with Cuba, Venezuela, and a couple other countries. And even here back at home, where our politics is to demonize the other side and give them a target so that they could feel better than themselves. They could feel better that my people there are not yours. And at the end of the day, it's only some people eat at the finest table while the masses suffer. Through social media recently, there has been an uptick of awareness. There has been an uptick of positive and educating conversations where people are becoming aware of how the sausage is made, how the tin is made, even how the water is catched and preserved to place the sausage in the pan. So, even from a perspective now of how a politician speak to the layman or the average man is changing, and it's, the only thing is it is not changing fast enough.
Yeah.
And so we just need to just a short boss asks, what are we standing for? We are standing for edifying conversations. We are standing for liberating our people through thought, because I believe even if we protest,
and we don't have the result-oriented mindset, and there's an action mindset, all our process and all our actions are complete failure.
Correct.
A lot of talkers in Trinidad. Very few do it. I just wanna put just 1-2 cents on about. I know I overstay my thing. Keep your eye on the demography of the country, and this is not race talk. It's just about, again, this is part of education. I had to do a paper, not a paper, an article for my alma mater. For their Black Heritage Month, and it had a lot. It's just about understanding the demography of Trinidad's population right now. It's quite interesting. It's 37.7 East Indian, 37.3 or 4 African, mixed. It has rocketed in the past decade to about 24%, 22-24, with the other races, of course, making up a very small percentage. Now, if I know that, the politicians know that. Trinidad's politics, those who consider, and this is where people are pointing out the UNC may have put itself in a corner by perpetuating its race-based for the large part. That's throwing the direction on the UNC, because I'm just speaking from what I have seen in social media at the end of elections and the savage attacks and language used against African people. I haven't seen too many from Africa, only in response to the insults. Something is really up there, but
it's history. It's history.
Put themselves in a corner. Yeah, the person who is let me just keep it general. The person who is continuing on a race baseline is putting themselves in a corner.
Yeah.
As the mixed group is going to have a greater say. And from observation, it is clear to me where the mixed are likely to lead.
Jonathan,
And I think you will start to see increasingly desperate attempts by the UNC to do something, to form additional coalitions, etc.
exactly. So they want to soften the edges by forming coalitions, because they realize
there's no way out. There's no way to win otherwise. There's no path, as they say, the path to the White House. There's no path to the White House.
But
by continuing the racial rhetoric.
In that, just as far as I know it, UNC by itself only won one election, and that one election was the one in 2001 that lasted 1 year or some kind of weird thing like that. But other than that, UNC has never won an election by themselves, because that's just the reality of our politics. The appeal of UNC generally is national enough, I'll put it that way. So I agree with you, and
it's not a national, but there's only one national party.
that's true. That is true. And
it's unfortunate. It's not a full democracy.
Yes, that's true.
It's not fully participated in and participated of.
Mike, this is it. Before Nathan leave the conversation,
Go ahead, short boss.
I believe that as a country and a society, we shouldn't, when it comes to politics, talk about race. We shouldn't talk about Africans, we shouldn't talk about Indians, because at the end of the day, this is my opinion.
Yeah, go ahead.
We all are citizens trying to be equal. And you see, that race thing is to divide and conquer. And that is my opinion on trying to think.
Your opinion is shared by many. There's a great American, Noam Chomsky. He's now in his 90s. He's always underlying the issues between the haves and the have-nots, But the haves are very clever, that they throw many divisive.
I agree, but Noam is a communist and I don't like them. They're murderous people. I view communists just as I view Nazis, and he's a communist. So he's a very intelligent guy. He is very intelligent.
My last comment before I leave, right? Everybody's talking about how United States is losing the value of the dollar. Everybody, but no, United States is not saying anything about it. Because they have a Trump card, and they're going to then pull the Trump card yet. They had all the news. Everybody saying the oil is not everybody's backing the oil in a different currency, and America is not saying anything. They have a Trump card to pull, and they're going to pull the Trump card very, very soon. And we will see.
We have to talk about that.
I don't know.
America is
I don't know if I'll say they aren't saying anything, because they are talking about it. They are talking about it. That's one. And two, I don't think America's trump card when it comes to geopolitics is a secret. They spread democracy across the world. Like, that's not a secret. it's yeah, room.
America has unified. Democracy is
I didn't know you needed me to say this. They spread democracy around the world. I didn't know you needed the quotation. Yeah, room.
America, China, Russia. Remember, and even India, some place Brazil. Those were young societies. Those societies are, in terms of economic, in terms of war, in terms of potential for war, in terms of readiness, are different societies. So America cannot, as it would have done 75 years ago, open their mouth and the world shake. There are some very powerful nations now that has become educated enough as a populace, has come developed enough to say here what we are ready to make our own decisions. And that society throughout history, it has had the Roman Empire, it has had the Persian Empire, it has always changed. And our different society has led in different stages of society.
Yes, empires have a life cycle. Empires have a life cycle. And that's why some people in the United States...
There's a degree of exhaustion too, as far as America is concerned.
Correct.
They have expanded themselves for too many years and too many wars and too many... You get the impression the people themselves, the society... wants a hold upon all of that.
Exactly.
But they have a lot of trouble.
In my closing statement, that's what I'd say to that. In my closing, I'll say that. When I look at the United States, it's obvious. Even people in the United States, they're fed up of the American empire project. And I think some people in the US, they seem to see the writing on the wall, and they see that if we attempt to continue this empire building, we will die as a country. So we could revert to a nation and stay there.
Yep. This year is the only year, this is the first year since the Second World War that the US is not in a global conflict directly.
Very shocking. But they're in Russia. Yeah. They are in Russia. All right, people. Hey, this went real long.
Fellas, this is the first time I ever had a conversation like this.
Yeah.
Trust me, I enjoyed this conversation 110%.
I like that.
And I could talk to you guys any day. I love this conversation because I love my country and I love my country to get better. But trust me, I love this conversation 110%. And thank you very much for this conversation. And I know that.
I appreciate it, bro. I appreciate it.
Oh, we need more of it. We need more of it.
This is what we do, short boss. On Thursday, it's Thursday Talks. We come and we discuss like this. I am here basically every weeknight around 9:30. If I'm not here, I'm on my Discord server, and I tell you that. If you want to find that Discord server, you find it on my TikTok profile. If it's not, well, when you see me 9:30 weeknights, I am here for the Mindful Live session. This has been the Mindful Live. It was nice as per usual. I'll see you guys again for the next one. We have another one tomorrow. Tomorrow is Friday. Around that 9:30 p.m. time is when we'll be starting. So I hope you guys were educated, informed, or entertained. That's all I have for now. And I will see you guys next time. Laters, folks. Peace.